Okay, we're live. Hey everyone, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Just welcome to Lee TV, a podcast where I interview leaders in business, military, community, and social settings. Today we've got a great opportunity to talk today to Major retired Sean Lanier. And you're going to enjoy today's discussion. It's based on talking about the improvement of the pool of officers that will lead our future armies, these officers being minority officers. So I hope you enjoyed today's discussion, and let's lead into it. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Major retired Sean Lanier. Hey, sir, how you doing?
Hey, Otis, thanks again for having me on.
Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and chat with me today. So let me set this up. Let me set up this the discussion. I'm opening up the panel a little bit larger so that more people will come and participate in our discussion. And this is a long time coming as far as a discussion with you and I. I was looking back on my Facebook Messenger history, and you messaged me all the way back in 2011. And I was a junior officer at that time at the 101st Airborne Division, and you gave me some excellent points of advice there that I really took to heart later on in my military career. And I thought, okay, this would be a great opportunity now, where I saw we made a connection via a mutual friend of ours, Major Ford, and she connected us to have this discussion on this platform. And I think the things that you're bringing today to talk with us about, it's a really, really good thing that Army leadership, military leadership, social leadership should probably tap into if you want to get some of those diamonds in the rough, so to say, in Black communities. So before we get into that, though, I'd like for you to, talk to us about who you are, what's your background. We want to humanize you a little bit so that people can understand who you are and everything as such.
I guess I should be humble in this one because my GRTC Sergeant Major Jack Frost is probably out there watching me, so ready to smoke me. But just a humble kid. I was born in Newport News, Virginia, raised in Petersburg, Virginia. My father come from a military family. My father was a medevac pilot in Vietnam. My grandfather was in the Navy in World War II, when there was a time when only African Americans had 4 jobs that they could go into the Navy. But I also grew up in a military family in the sense that, in order to get to some discussions on the family reunion over the summer, you had to have served. Otherwise, there. So I had uncles that were Sergeant Major Marine Corps during Vietnam, other uncles that served in Vietnam and, Gulf War. So when I joined up myself later on in 1990, it was kind of like a rite of passage. So I knew that I wanted to go in the military since I was 2 years old. When my mother would tell you that I went to my first air show, and they were prying, imagine this kid just looking at planes and prying their fingers off the fence. So I was that kid, and just always wanted to be there, getting into debates with my my cousin, Major retired Kenny DeVoe, when he was a cadet at Virginia State University, about the defense bill in 1977, the B-1 bombers, and so I was that type of kid. I was just always fascinated with military service, officers, enlisted, and just the whole gamut.
Got you. So you had the military kind of indoctrinated into your blood. It was kind of like, hey, this was my natural transition. This is the thing that I'm going to get into. So you've got, I would say, a pure love that, some people may doubt, some people may question, those who don't know you, but in your heart where your love and as far as the military is. And that's something that I would say is absolutely appreciated. Myself as a veteran, I'm the first in my family. Well, I've got a cousin who joined the Marines, I believe Navy. And I'm the first in my family to join the military. I remember high school back in Brooklyn, New York. Hey, I saw these kids walking around. These, I believe they were Marine ROTC, junior ROTC in high school. And I looked at them like, they're weirdos. What are they doing? What are they doing? And, I went off to college, came back home, and then 9/11 happened. And I said, okay, I was kind of pissed off. I wanted to join the military. I want to make something of myself. So I entered as a young enlisted medic out of Brooklyn, New York. Joined and did that for a few years, did ROTC because my leadership believed in who I was, and came back as a medical officer. But that's my short military career.
Interesting.
I'd like to talk, yeah, tell me. So what do you think is interesting about it, sir? Share with me.
The great thing about the military is that you have so many different stories of intersections, and like for myself, my uncle was retired as a master chief in the Navy. Did a lot of work with lasers, but the first gift that he sent me was a F-4 Phantom because he encouraged me to become a Navy pilot. So but when I got to middle school, the JRTC would come down from the high school. They brought the drill team. And it was fascinating. They had the drill team there, and it was like they were basically recruiting to, show you. And that's what got me signed up with JRTC. Of course, I was in the Boy Scouts, so it was kind of like a jump off from there also. But I didn't realize it at the time, but we really had an all-star cast. The JRTC senior Army instructor was Armor Lieutenant Colonel retired Cyril Archibald Hawkins Jr. Recently passed away, God bless him, but he was an armor officer. He was an black armor officer working on his PhD at UVA. Had some troubles with plagiarism, but we saw him struggle through that, fight through it, get his PhD, and become the principal. He was replaced by Caucasian aviation officer, Clark Richards. But we had the backbone was Jack Frost, a Green Beret Special Support Forces Sergeant Major that, there. So for us, it was always, in military combat arms, they encourage all branches of service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard. We knew about the different commissioning sources, whether it was OCS, service academies, senior military colleges, HBCUs. And they encourage us as alumni. It was expected in our community to come back and share your experiences with others, and they would give you the entire floor, whether you are a private from basic training, or I remember Tammy Broadnet's that was West Point class. She came and talked to us about her experiences as a West Point cadet, and then she came back home over the break as a transportation officer in Germany as a second lieutenant. So we had all these stories of people coming back in. They were our peers that we looked up to, not the old gray hair guys coming back and telling their stories. Not that the old gray hair guys are not good, but they were a little bit closer to us in age. And once you see that in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade year, by the time you get to your 12th grade year, you're going somewhere. If not, then that's really on you. So very different upbringing for me. We marched in the parades for Virginia State Homecoming, Norfolk State Homecoming. So we were introduced to HBCUs. We interacted with a lot of the senior ROTC cadets. So a lot of what I do now is rooted in that. So it's not like it's something I just pull out and make this stuff up. It was like, no, it was inculcated in us in a very natural way. And it served us well, even to the point now where Colonel Michael Patrick, the commander for 7th Sustainment Brigade, he was 2 years behind me, Norfolk State grad, and I went to VMI. So it wasn't you're going to VMI, you're going to West Point. It was like, hey, that's the path that you choose to go. We respected all of those ways of commissioning, and it's bore some fruit. And Sergeant Major Frost had tentacles, that to even rooted back to his time at Virginia State with General Dennis Fye, who was a 50-year cadet there at Virginia State when he was there. So there's this rich history that a lot of our veterans have out here, and connecting the dots in this lineage. And that's very important, that I think that the Army always takes advantage of, because of the transient nature of the positions, or being a PMS there for 1 or 2 years, or officer that's coming and running these programs, that there's continuity that you have here that's very critical to building that trust and bond in the communities.
So you spoke of continuity. I see that you were the beneficiary of having excellent officers during their active duty times, officers and even junior enlisted, excellent folks during their time to come and actually teach, coach, and mentor y'all, whether actively or passively. Actively in the sense of giving you the actual training, passively in the sense of an actual positive presence around you. You know, so
Yes.
that's a wonderful thing. I'd like to know something though. What's the motivation, do you think, when or the feeling of pride that some may have when they come back home and they see this untapped, you know, well of talent? What do you think are some of their motivations when they come home and see those things?
I think when you come back home, a kid sees that guy made it, that he made it out of the town. There's three types of kid in every town. There's the kids who leave and never come back. There's the kids who left and come back, and there's the kids who never left. And when you folks that leave and never come back, sometimes it's looked upon as like, wow, man, they made it, they got out. But there's this wonderment, like, what happened to them? Did they make it? But then those who come back, it's like, oh man, they came back. They got the car, they did these selling their stories, and it's a pathway out. And then for the folks that didn't leave, then that's there's it's not, you didn't leave us. You represented us. Thanks for there's a huge amount of pride that you get from teachers, coaches, guidance counselors when they come back home. They see that you're doing well and that you're doing good, because then that motivates them to look at opportunities and see things in the kids that they have now. And I think that continuity is important, that you have that. So a lot of times when you have these kids that go to programs like ROTC scholarship or going to West Point, people have to understand that when that kid graduates from high school, the celebration and the pride that the family has from that kid that was running around with the ashy knees, that, hey, that's Miss Peach's grandson out there, But when they kid graduates, that family, you're putting their hopes and dreams and their legacy into that institution's hands. So if that kid flunks out of school or doesn't make it, that family bears the weight of that burden also, that failure. They're still going to embrace them, but the pool is contaminated in a sense there also. And I think that sometimes when recruiters look at that, or they recruit these kids in, there's a obligation to make sure that kid is like a baton, that you hand them off to that partner in exchange, and don't drop the baton. And it's important to focus on the retention, because if that kid flunks out or doesn't make it, he doesn't go back home and say, well, I flunked out. He's like, well, they didn't like me. They're not going to always come clean. But you got to understand how that affects you. And I think sometimes recruiters or people walk into these situations where there was a issue. One organization I went to in California, that I was an alumni rep for VMI, that reason why they talked to us, because they had two kids that were sexually assaulted at West Point, and they were, hey, look, we're not sending a kid there. And people don't understand that stuff, that stain, can be there for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And a lot of times people that are in these positions, recruiters and counselors, they don't go back, or they say, oh, well, they don't like the military. Well, no. It's not they don't like the military. It's like, hey, you didn't take care of the kid. And sometimes people don't unpack that why, because recruiters have numbers. They're not trying to get to the why. They just want the kid and keep it going. But it's like, no, you got to embrace the community and get to know them before they trust you with your kid, because that's your treasure. That's part of their community.
Tracking. So, it has to be a sort of symbiotic investment from both the military side, investing in the community that child came from, and also from the child itself going into that military community. That military community must take care of that child as well. Almost in the spirit of W.B. Du Bois. You want to have. I kind of almost want to add to his. One of his programs that he was part of. You want to have an enhanced, almost talented 10th, make it almost a talented 100 instead of a talented 10th.
Yes.
There are multiple opportunities for making connections with multiple communities who can invest and have that sort of trust in you, and you've got to trust in them as well. So, I think that's the motivation behind our discussion today. And I saw you sent me over some PowerPoint slides that we could go into, but let's not go into it quite yet. Let's go ahead and bring up some of the comments that I already see on here. And if you guys by chance have comments or questions that you have for myself or Sean, send them over. We will post them on the page itself, and we'll have the opportunity to just share away as much as we can the different comments and questions. So the first comment that I see here, and we've got one from Major Ford, our mutual connect. How you doing, ma'am? Nice to see you posting on here. She said, looking forward to the interview, gentlemen. I'd say this is more a mutual admiration podcast discussion more than an interview, really, because, I respect Mr. Lanier and he, mutually respects me. And, this is just a good conversation. If you by chance get good information from it, then that's just a secondary, tertiary effect of our discussion. So thank you for your comment, ma'am. We've got Ms. Sharon Twin Denson. She said, "Hey, Sean, how you doing?" That's a good thing.
It's a small world with the internet. Major Ford, never served with her before, but met her through the internet, through African American Army officers and that group, and we crossed paths a little bit later. Talked about her son potentially going to the ROTC, and then ran into Twin Denson in San Antonio there, and I see John James is on the net, former Apache pilot, lieutenant colonel, but we spend a lot of time together on the track circuit. He's a track coach at what's it called, Team War down here in Suffolk, Virginia. So I see him a lot. We chat quite a bit. He's heavily involved with the ROTS, also the Hampton Roads chapter down there. So a lot of overlapping relationships. Good people. So.
Yeah. Shout out to the African American Army Officers Group. I'm sure you know of a little bit of the history with me in that group. That was one of the things that we created back at my MS3 year. So my MS3 year at Lincoln University, Missouri. That's one of the groups that we made, and it's something that I'm proud of.
That's interesting. What year was that?
This is MS2, MS3 year was 2006, 2007.
Well, the interesting thing about it, I was in CGSC in 2009, 2010, part of that class, and part of the ROTS, we came out to Lincoln, Missouri, and Lincoln University as part of that group there. Met a couple of gentlemen, and still in contact with one gentleman now that's now a major. That's how old I am. But during that time also, which probably people don't know, is I recruited Wagnerville, Colonel Dwayne Wagner, to jump in on that site. And, we had some discussions about his contributions and not waiting until folks became majors, that his knowledge, it was critical to get that out to lieutenants and captains, so they saw those issues before they became problems and became the major. And we've gone through some discussions, and there were some times he wanted to quit, and I kind of had to, step off the rank and kind of, hey, sir, get back in the fight. We need you. It's just watching that blossom over the last few years has been, behind the scenes. He's been a great mentor, learned a lot, helped out a lot of people. So, so that's a little bit of the secret behind there. I can say that I officially recruited Wagnerville.
Awesome. So, we've got some more comments. We've got Ms. Sharon Denson. She's my Sora. How you doing, Sora? She said, "Hey, Sean." We've got, of course, you mentioned John James. Looking good, Sean. Hey, man, it's a whole lot of complimentary comments coming your way. That's what's up. We appreciate that. We've got Doreen Hurd saying, "Hey, Sean, thanks for doing this." I don't think her question was fully typed out. No, go ahead and Doreen, fully type out your question if you get a chance.
Colonel Hurt, Delta super officer, and her husband, Major General Alexander. But Doreen's gonna put you to work. So she I know I gotta be on my P's and Q's. She's gonna let me know if I'm not respected in the ROTS and doing right. So, but I love Colonel Hurt, wonderful advocate, wonderful mentor, relentless energy. Her level of commitment and some of the senior leaders in the ROTS is amazing. And it's a testament to their commitment to not just the service, but to giving back for years and decades. And I've really benefited from Colonel Hurt and so many other officers over the years.
Excellent. Man, you see the Greek connection, man. Hey, shout out to the Greek connection, honestly. Myself as a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, yourself as a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, her as a Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Just shout out to the Greek letter organizations and the connections we made through that, man.
They're huge advocates. I know I didn't. Again, I graduated from VMI, so I went graduate chapter in Seoul, Korea, Mu Phi Lambda, and but been positively embraced over the years, and with 1.9 million members in the Divine Nine, and I'd see that the Black Greek Letter organizations are critical because they're the only organizations in our society and here in America that have both horizontal and vertical leadership at
Yeah.
all levels. And even DoD has partnered with them, but I would love to see that get more not at the national level, but understanding down to the local chapter level that the benefits, because huge influence in the education community. And I think that some of the challenges is that it's not a shortage of talent in the country. The issue is that the talent isn't always aware of the opportunities, and sometimes we as adults have to put aside our egos, our interests for the benefit of kids. And that happens all too often where, well, I'm not going to talk to this person. I don't like that person. Like, well, who cares? We're trying to get these kids an opportunity to have a shot at the title here and getting past those egos. And I think even for recruiters or folks at the military, getting past that layer of skin or building that relationship and showing up at the cookouts or showing up at the events and spending time, let them get to know you and not just coming in and chase numbers. That's huge, because once you have that trust, like you said, whether it's an Alpha, Sigma, there's so many overlapping, even for non-Greeks that you here that you can just tap in from, but you got to have that validation, not that individual, but and you got to be willing to show up. 90% of life is showing up. It's that simple.
Correct. So we've got a couple more comments, and it looks like we've got a first question coming in. So the comments are from Miss Donna Rice. She said, "Great, good discussion. Thank you, Miss Rice." And of course, we've got Sharon again. She said, Alma rocks, love Sean.
Don't sleep on Donna Rice out there. Donna Rice is a national curriculum writer for JROTC. Dr. Donna Rice. She just met her. So she is a force, and she's now moved into the middle school curriculum, and we're partnering with her to help shape the middle school curriculum and teaching them how to study with another woman named Dr. Donna O. Johnson Mackey, who is also part of NSBE. From there, because if you can change the middle school curriculum nationally and give them a better study techniques, then you're going to have better grades, better SAT, ACT scores, and improve that. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. But don't sleep on Donna Rice out there. She's quiet, but she's a powerhouse out there.
Excellent. So the first question that's coming in comes from Ms. Hurt, and the question is, how can we regroup from making not the best impression with family and other influences who are turned off by our initial attempt to get their support?
I think that the biggest thing that we in the military that we have to do is we have to listen. All right. When as a volunteer alumni recruiter for VMI, even they will say, "Hey, Sean, how do you get all these kids with cars?" Well, when I go to a college fair, I listen. I ask the kid, "Hey, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And then I listen, and then I talk to them about how does VMI or how does the Army help them achieve their goals, and then I try to expand on how it's going to make them better. Because a lot of times kids say, well, I want to go into the Army. Well, what do you want to go in the Air Force? Well, you want to go to the Air Force? What do you want to do? Well, I want to do cyber. Well, the Army has cyber, the Navy has cyber, the Coast Guard has cyber. So they don't know, but you have to listen first and then shape it to how it's going to help them achieve their goal. And the other challenges that I love our different branches of service, but you got to be respectful and knowledgeable of all branches of service, because, what's the best fit for the kid? Where they're going to have the most success. And we have a lot of GRTC instructors that may be Air Force GRTC, but, well, I don't want the kid to go to Army. Well, you're not paying that kid's bill to go to college. So a lot of times it's informing them. And I think it's you have to have this relationship in the community where you're able to adjust. I have to pitch it a little bit different with teachers, guidance counselors, and how I'm going to help them be more effective and be knowledgeable so they can better serve their students. Or same thing with GRTC instructors, and the same thing with the family. But with a lot of the families, it's just listening and figuring out what they want to do. And I think that people have to understand that Black African Americans in particular are not a monolith. A lot of these families that you're talking to in the middle class, they already have money. So you can't go out here and say, well, I got an ROTC scholarship and pass around like free chicken. They already got money. They can pay for it to go to school. And some of the families tell you that. So, but you have to talk to them about how they're going to be better leaders, get to that Fortune 500 company, how to use their leadership experience there to get a tier 1 MBA program, or, how you do study abroad is going to help broaden their resume and broaden their experiences, but you got to be open to those type of things and not be wedded to your path was the only path to get there. And I love our folks in uniform here, but when they start talking, and I've seen this with so that I was at NNOA, National Naval Officers Association conference a couple of years ago, and you had one side of the room, but we were on a panel, and all the officers, they're talking about the Naval Academy, then you got the other officers talking about HBCUs, and I was like, hey, hold on a second. And I was like, hey, Miss EFAT, stand up. And say, hey, this is a guidance counselor from IC Norcom High School right here in Portsmouth, Virginia. This is her young lady right now. And you know what? Miss EFAT has 800 kids that she's responsible for, and you're not getting any of those kids because her student that's here beside you wants to go to GMU, and you guys are talking about the Naval Academy, and you guys talking about HBCUs, and you're not being respectful of the audience. So sometimes, I hate to be crude, but sometimes we have to tell ourselves to just shut up and listen. Yeah,
exactly.
It's that simple. But I think that there's this wedded notion also that, well, people don't like the military, like Vietnam. Well, those aren't the parents that's out there. They're not the parents that are coming up now. They're a generation removed from Vietnam. So I think that sometimes we hold on to these notions that we can't be successful. And it's like, no, you just need to show up, just show up, listen to them, figure out what's there, and help them connect the dots. But here's the deal: white, black, indifferent. Most of these parents out here, they want their kids to get the best education possible.
Absolutely.
And pay as little as possible. Whether they're rich or poor. That's consistent across the board, and what's the best. And if you can show them that pathway there and connect the dots, and I know they're concerned about talking about war and those type of things. Majority of people aren't getting deployed, especially not since I was there. I mean, we had 100,000 people in Iraq and Afghanistan simultaneously. Now it's a few people. So you got to be the leader that's out here, take control of the conversation, and let them know the facts, and don't back down on it. Don't be afraid of it. It's the worst thing you can do is get on the back foot talking to these parents. You don't have to be overly aggressive, but listen to them, but then explain to them like, hey, no, this is how it really works.
Yeah, I got you. So, sir, I know we took a few questions and comments there. Let's jump into the slides. And so we're going to have just the blank screen, the full screen with just the slide information, allowing you to talk over. If I want to come in and ask a question or so, where I will break it off, where it's just two of us on the side with the slide. So let me know. Are you ready for that, sir?
I'm ready. Shoot it.
All right, let's do this. So here's our first slide.
Yep, that's our organization, Resolve Solutions Incorporated. We're a locally based nonprofit here in Alexandria, Virginia, that helps kids that want to go into military civilian service. Over the last 7 years, we've helped about 510 kids, earn about $45 million in offers with kids in 23 states. Our goal is to get up to about 500 kids per year. That's about $40 million a year. But more importantly, in partnering with the ROTC in order to achieve that, over the next 5 years, we're poised to help about 2,000 plus kids. That translates into about $735 million to $1 billion in total lifetime earned income. That's also about another $150 million to $300 million, depending on where they go to school for their GI Bill benefits. That also translates into almost $2 trillion in purchasing power with the VA certificates. So for us, it's looking at how do you increase generational wealth with this initiative.
Okay, jump into the next.
This is just a recent letter signed by the Secretary of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army. And at the bottom line is like, it fits into what we're trying to do. Synchronous outreach to different groups and activities, tying the Army to officers to academia, local communities, and improving a diverse Army. So that fits into nested into what we're trying to do. You can go to the next slide. The bottom line is that the Army spends about $300 million on ROTC scholarships per year. There's about a 52% success rate. Success is defined as kids that get the ROTC scholarship coming out of high school to actually go on to graduate and commission. That's about 33% success rate at HBCUs. What we've done over the last 7 years, that just at VMI, which is my alma mater, because we did not start off as a nonprofit. We started off just as a volunteer alum with VMI, but that's why we have a little bit better track record there. But the bottom line is that 83% of the kids that we had going to VMI, which is a senior military college, 83% of those kids are on track to have either graduated or on track to graduate. And then when you look at our HBCU numbers, when you look at the national HBCU average of 33%, we have success stories, at Virginia State University at 71%, Hampton at 70%, our lowest success rate is in Morgan State. Bowie State about 57%. And when you start to look at the reasons why we don't have success, it's mostly in the first or second year for overweight, dropping out of school from, that's a lot, lack of mentors or PT. So our model is kind of like, hey, how do we solve these issues before they become problems?
How exactly can you sense, how exactly are you able to address those problems before they become too severe a problem?
Well, if you go, I think if you go to the next slide.
Okay.
Here. The next one from there.
Next one over.
Mm-hmm. Our solution is kind of kind of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. So you have to have college preparedness, student tracking, on the front end in order to get that pool of candidates. Then you got to make sure you're tethered onto mentors, which is hugely critical from that. Then when you go to the top right, having that baseline, and once you have that pool of talent, how do you improve their study skills so they can get the requisite scores? And I know that the big thing now that, the SAT scores and ACT scores, there's schools that are not that's not using it as a requirement. Look, if the Army's spending $300 million on the ROTC scholarships per year, they are not going to get rid of the SAT and ACT scores. And a lot of you got to read the fine print now with these schools that, and I've gone up to several virtual college tours, that a lot of schools are tethering SAT and ACT scores to their merit-based scholarships. So you got to read the fine print. If you want the money, you're gonna have to take this score. And then the last component of that is that summer bridge programs, internships, physical fitness. We know that there's about an 82% success rate when a kid goes to summer school to start off before they start college. Mm-hmm. They get acclimated, they get the academic confidence up, they meet some of their classmates, sometimes they meet some of their professors, so they're already acclimated. But also it's a chance to knock some of the rust off if you have a physical fitness program to kind of see, hey, because a lot of kids now, they're not coming out in shape. I mean, I was in GRTC, I was an athlete. And kids are not, in that same shape. They're not all bad, but it's definitely not. The physical fitness component is critical, and that's more critical at ROTC programs because think about it: if a kid's not coming in on campus on shape already, they get there in August or September, then you do the homecoming and all the other activities. And one of the things that people don't realize that when we were in school, you were at home for maybe 4 days over Thanksgiving. Now kids have like about 2 weeks. So if you think about it, if you're not coming in shape and the PT is optional, by the time they get ready to take that final PT test, it's December. So a lot of kids and maybe not as resilient. So that's what we try to put those puzzle and pieces of the puzzle together to make it all fit. And if you go to the next slide, it kind of lay it out a little bit better. In that,
there you go.
I
don't know why the slides are doing this. It's kind of cutting off pieces of information that we have on there.
No problem. And I can make this available to anyone that wants it. But the biggest thing is that, I want to get the Army or a lot of leaders to understand is that an investment in a kid, when we meet kids, you're talking about high school, maybe 2 to 3 years, then get them through 4 to 5 years of college. And quite frankly, depending on who you talk to, a lot of the leaders are not going to be in their jobs for maybe 2 to 3 years, and then they're moving on. Then you look at a professor of military science, they may be there for 2 to 3 years. There's some schools, unfortunately, they get a PMS for 1 year because then they get selected for battalion command. So the continuity is not there. So a lot of people want this talent, but they're not investing in the community long enough. I mean, who's going to be there to, watch a kid go through the process, from middle school, 2 to 3 years, high school, 3 to 4 years, college, 4 to 5 years to become a lieutenant. Then you got to pick them up, organizations like the ROTS, NNOA, AFCOMA, to pick them up as a lieutenant all the way through their military career. So you have to make that investment on these programs to make sure that the pipeline is built. And that's what this chart tries to show, that, in middle school, working with Donna Rice and her national leadership program to try to have a national base of pool of kids. And when I say national base, our goal is to try to have about 15,000 kids and about 10,000 mentors. And then, but imagine that introducing to Guarantee 4.0, which is Donald Johnson Mackey, to try to improve their study habits so they have better, more competitive grades and test scores. Then you move more to high school and do the same thing. There's another program called College Options Foundation that's headed up by Terry Wilfong that has access to 500,000 kids in JROTC. But then, you come into their freshman year of college after the kids get identified, they're going to go ROTC, service academies, senior military college, that type of thing. Well, how do we set them up for success? Sending them to summer school on the front end, taking 3 to 6 credit hours, but then connecting them with the military mentors and make sure they have a military mentor or the ROTS or NNOA or AFCOMA, and making sure they're with them, because what you really want is to have a relationship as someone that they can talk to that's not adversarial that they may have in ROTC, but someone who has that wisdom and knowledge and expertise, and build that relationship and trust over a 3 to 4 year window. And if you do that, I think you have much better outcomes, because I'm a product of that. And there's a lot of people that's been successful that when you talk to them, it's like, oh, how do you know that guy? Well, I met them in high school, or I met them in college. Well, what we're trying to do is formalize that, put some structure behind it, and then put the academic rigor behind it. And that's a 4 to 7 year plan for us. What we want to do is be able to figure out who are our mentors that's out there, what are they doing successful, the ones that are not as great, how do we retrain them up and get them to be better mentors, or, hey, get them to help us out in another capacity if that's not their thing.
Got it. Hey, so we've got some good questions coming in. If you don't mind, let's go ahead and jump into some of the questions that we see here. We got one from Mr. Jonathan Fair. What's going on, Jonathan? He asks, how would you suggest convincing minority officers to continue past their initial obligation? That's a question that I've heard from a lot of folks before.
I think that understanding, that's where the mentors come in. You got to get kids to understand the long game. I mean, that's, you got to understand the long game. And I think that, I grew up in Petersburg, so you're a product of your environment, and what you see is what is deemed to be successful. And sometimes when you don't have that, someone to fill that void, to help. My mom, she dropped out of college. She married my father, who was a warrant officer. He dropped out of school. So when I went to school, my family couldn't tell me about what it meant to become an officer or going to college or what's next after college. So it's important to have some other folks. And we believe that you need to have 2 to 3 adults in a kid's life throughout this process. And sometimes the adults are not the parents. So, and explaining to them the why of what they're doing it. But more importantly, being in a space where you can have that conversation. Sometimes having that conversation with the ROTC instructor in the ROTC office is an adversarial environment. So being able to, talk to the kid at the track practice, or their home, or going out to, Starbucks or Panera Bread and breaking bread with each other. And I think that a lot of times people, when you invite someone into your home or you break bread with someone, there's a different level of trust. Where they let their guard down. And you got to have those type of relationships, but we got to do it a little bit sooner, a little bit more consistently. And veterans out here have a lot of that. They have a lot of credibility, a lot of experience to share those things. But explain to them, why would you stay by your obligation? Well, we want you to stay stay through company command, because it'll make you a more effective leader. If you get out, we want you to be a much more capable entrepreneur out here. But at the same time, the Army wants you to stay because, that after company command, that's the first indicator for their pool of potential general officers. Once you make major, I'm not going to say the Army doesn't care, but they have an automatic discriminator right there, which is called CGSC, where they're going to cut 50%. So getting them to company command is the real trick from there. And I know that there's a lot of brigade commanders, a lot of leaders out here, a lot of kids that, hey, I want to go into the military, become an officer and get this skill. Look, guy, let me explain something to you. Your skill as a leader is a leadership. It's great that you want to go signal and get that branch, but look at the certifications. 80 to 85% of the jobs out here do not require a STEM degree. So we got to change the discussion with the kids, and that starts in middle school and high school, and having those discussions of what it means to be an officer, officership, and being a leader. There's a difference, and there's a reason why you want to go maneuver fires and effects, because you understand there's a different mindset. It's a different type of leadership. It's a reason why you have CEOs of FedEx and Fortune 500 companies that were maneuver fires and effects officers, and we have to do a little bit better job in explaining it. And sometimes a lot of our officers that came up, I think that sometimes they're a little bit biased because of their own upbringing, that they weren't part of that. That somehow it's a stain or an indictment on them. And it's not. You need to be informed also, so you can let the kid you have to let them be as informed as possible, as much as possible, so they can make the decision, not based off your personal biases. And you got to let that stuff go.
Got it. Let's go ahead and continue on the slide. I'll put it up on the full screen. And you fine with this slide? You want to jump into this one?
Okay. Nope. I think we're good. I think we're good on the slide. Slides. I think the last one up here is a timeline, and this is our timeline chart of what we're looking at. And again, our goal is to have 70% success rate. I'm also, I was an aviator, but I'm also a logistician. So, under promise, over deliver. So what we want to do is our goals next year is to help about 250 kids earn offers. We want to get to about 10% of those kids to send them to summer school. 10% of the kids that are rising sophomores, send them a language immersion, summer school after that, and then build on that each year. What we're looking for is that, again, the academies are typically looking for the kids in the top 10%. We're looking for kids in a kind of 11 to 40% range, because I think combination of those amount of successes will put more pressure on the kids in the 41 through 60%. So you have to have, what we're trying to do is, each one of these kids are walking billboards, but, at the end of graduation, you want that kid to have the 2,000, 3,000 followers on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, posting videos, but they're speaking to other kids that are 14 to 18 years old. But, they're not the old gray hair guys. And if you can build that one and show them doing language immersion opportunities, study abroad, ROTC, Project Global Officer, then they're also doing internships with Boeing, Google, Amazon, those type of things. Kids are smart. They'll figure out their own pathway. They just need to see more role models and people executing, and not telling them what they can't do, but showing what they've done and what they're doing.
We got you, sir. So I'll go ahead and return back to our dual screen. And, really good information that you put out there for us. We've got some more questions coming in, and let's go ahead and bring up some of those questions. The next question that I see coming back comes from, again, Ms. Hurt. She says and asks, given all that's going on in our nation, how do you think we can leverage this time while our nation is paying attention and seem to want to actually do something to change the dynamic in our nation? It's a good question.
I think it's just having the conversation. Everyone is really caught up in their own interests in their own world. But again, 90% of life is showing up. And if you have a habitual relationship, and that's why, again, I go back to Black Greek letter organizations. You have different West Point societies. I see Pat Locke there. There are people out here that are warriors at finding talent, talking to kids, and they're doing it nonstop. They don't get a lot of appreciation. A lot of people are not aware of it. But how do we get more people involved to just do your job, just do your role, do your part of it? Don't try to solve the entire thing, because my philosophy is a little bit different. With my supply chain background, I look at it from the standpoint of like Wayne Gretzky. I skate to where the puck should be. If the Army is looking for 5,000 officers, and if I'm looking for 20% African Americans, I had to build my model to get 20% of that, factor in attrition. So when people say, "Oh, it's too hard to get 6 to 8% African Americans," like, no, it's not. You got to build a model to get to that point, and factor in the attrition, and then let DoD figure out what they want to sift through. And there's not a shortage of talent. We have to do the challenge of getting as much talent into the pot as possible to make it competitive, so DoD can select from there. And then, so that's what we're trying to build. So I think this through engagement and highlighting those success stories, that's the real key to it.
So I'd like to add to maybe answering the question. So she had asked, how can we leverage this time for the nation to pay attention to us? I would say better marketing. Tap into those people that have an idea as far as the pulse of the African American officer. We have, we're lucky enough that we're in select groups, and I'm lucky enough that I have a platform that I'm able to directly tap into those current African American officers to actually be in front of multiple markets to actually talk about their history and their story, their history, et cetera, can be appealing to the potential recruit that may be checking out what exactly is this career that this Black Army officer is all about. Give these marketers, give these people, give us an opportunity to have a platform to appeal to the target markets that we're looking for. The social things that's going on in the world, we are lucky enough that we are both part of the protected force and part of the demographic that it's affecting as well. We are the demographic of folks that are traditionally have suffered, would it be the police brutality, the racial injustice, but then we're also part of that demographic that's part of, we're the ones who are part of the military. We're the protectors of this nation. So it's a hell of a relationship that many of us who serve have traditionally in a nation that typically didn't really celebrate the Black officer, the Black enlisted, and we decided to answer that call, and so we're there right now, and so you should give us the opportunity to actually talk to and actually listen to our story, and if that's something that's appeal, then take whatever you'd like to take from it.
There's a balance to that, and I would offer this, that especially for Black officers, because I kind of grew up in this environment. Sometimes, again, we have to listen, and you got to understand that sometimes the generation of kids are not really interested in your story. They want it when they want it, not necessarily when they need it, and you have to recognize that and don't be offended by that, and Absolutely. Be open to it. And sometimes, they're going to circle around, but just make yourself available. Like, again, I'm a volunteer alumni recruiter for VMI and also University of Kansas, right? So, how do you get a lot of traction? You listen more than you talk, and share the opportunities and let them kind of feel around with it. And we have a success record. And I don't talk a lot about my background a lot of times, because, when I tell people that I was an aviator, they think that, I was flying around with the Wright brothers or something like that. It's like, no. But
the gray hair throws them off a little bit.
Yeah. But sometimes but sometimes my aviation, that's not what they're interested in. And I had to put my ego aside. That's my passion that I want to do since I was 2 years old. But it doesn't resonate with them. And we got to be careful out there, and then, give the people what they want and make yourself available. And I think you'll get more traction that way. But again, that forces us to become more knowledgeable about different branches of service.
Correct.
I was a history major, but I'm steeped in STEM. There, I've learned more. I see like Pat Lott down here. It's one of the first African American women to graduate from West Point. But I've learned more from her in the last 4 years about the academy process. They have a program through Dr. Dennis Rowe on SAT and ACT improvement that taught me on how to help kids with test scores. But you got to be that consummate, learner of information, in order to improve your craft, and not just be wedded to your idea, your experiences, because the information changes quite a bit.
Let me add to that. Not only just a knowledgeable person and a learner of information, but you've got to be proficient. You've got to be a proficient communicator of information as well. Because many of us may have, I know everything from A to Z when it comes to Army information. But if I am socially awkward and not able to communicate with the kids who I'm trying to sell and market this to, then it's pointless. So
kids have a way of letting you know.
Correct. So I'm kind of lucky that, in a sense that, hey, like you, I've got a degree in history as well. But then also psychology has kind of taught me the ways of communicating with anybody and everybody. And then of course, doing what I do with this platform, it allows me to, explore different ways how to market to folks. So I'm thankful and lucky I have that opportunity.
Man, I'm talking to kids now that are electrical engineers. They want to study Chinese and Arabic simultaneously. And I got to know the curriculum, what they need to do, what's the timeline, what class they need to take over the summer, how to be successful, know the pitfalls of that. And again, history, it doesn't make a difference. You just got to be knowledgeable to get them, whatever that kid's spark is, you just have to give them enough oxygen to turn into a flame. And that's where the network comes in with organizations and knowing people in Black Greek letter organizations, folks like Pat Locke. Who are the experts out there? Who are the other people you can connect them with? And one of the biggest challenges that I see is that, and I don't know why some people haven't figured it out. There's 500,000 kids in GRTC throughout this country, right? Those GRTC instructors have access to 500,000 kids. Then on top of that, that's just the kids in GRTC. So you can guesstimate that there's another 3 to 5 million kids that the GRTC instructors have access to by proximity. So if a lot of GRTC instructors that were comfortable with the principal, the athletic director, the guidance counselor, the head college and career counselor, if they knew the people in the community, they can touch more of those kids because, again, the model that I grew up in, my GRTC instructor knew almost everybody. We had kids that were in the band that never took GRTC. They got Air Force ROTC scholarships, and he was a Green Berets Army Special Forces guy. So that's you have to. I think we got to teach a lot of our folks and our veterans and give them the help that they need at the high school level, GRTC instructors, but we also got to challenge them. It can't be folks that you just hire that's going to be out here. They're just looking for a job that they get half the military pay, and that they're looking to, to get that back to the active duty pay. I understand for a lot of people it's going to be a job, but we really need more people that's working with kids. It's going to be a passion. And sometimes it's not immediate. Sometimes it takes a couple of years, but what I found is that some of my more successful GRTC instructors are not even the Army. Commander Clements at Suitland High School in Suitland, Maryland, or Commander Deborah Rogers, that's down at Potomac High School in Dumfries, Virginia, or Stuart Littlejohn, that's a Navy GRTC instructor that's down in Norfolk, Virginia. So those folks are on it, but all of the thing with all of them, they have relationships throughout the school. They're starting to get into more involved. They understand the process of getting kids into dual enrollment classes, AP classes. They're starting to get kids into cyber, badging, credentialing, those type of things, and I wish that DOD would look at how they change the incentivization structure of how they do JRTC, because I have more JRTC instructors that get excited about going to drill competitions. Well, you need to be getting excited about going to JLab or JRTC Leadership Academic Bowl, or getting them excited with BDPA to get them some badging, credentialing for cyber certificates. You got Air Force GRTC, they get funding now. They're teaching their kids how to fly drones and become pilots, through flight simulation. So we got to start looking at, what is the needs of the Army, the Navy branches of service, and how they get those skill sets, the badging, credentialing, again, taking that spark and turning it and giving it oxygen and turn it to a flame. Because, drill competition is not paying for these kids to go to school. That's great. I love the annual inspections. You need that one that opens up opportunities to get the kids in the academies. But when you're spending all of your time and getting ready for annual inspection, well, hey, there's some, classes they need to be learning up here to get some other skill sets to make them attracted to industry. And all of them are not going to go into ROTC or service academies. A lot of these kids are going to be, winners in life. So we got to take that 500,000 kids, because they're going to be ambassadors. Also, military may not be for them, but they may have kids. So you, again, look at that pipeline.
Correct. Look, we've got the questions and comments are coming in now. Let's see. Let's go ahead and bring up from Pat Luck. You mentioned Pat's name earlier twice. The question is, Sean, talk about Dr. Rowe score improvement and qualifying ACT scores for scholarships.
Well, Dr. Dennis Rowe, West Point graduate, I want to say class of 74 or 76, had horrible scores West Point, but got it fit. He got it worked out, and his passion became how to help kids get the scores like he struggled with it, how to get them qualified for West Point. So he developed this program, which is sanctioned by West Point, where when the kid has the nominations, they get all the qualifications with the exception of score. They teach them these techniques to get them the scores that they need to make it into the service academy or prep school. He has a team of volunteers, academy grads, people who just love helping kids, that they identify the kid, they call them up, they have a session with them, and then they give them the homework. And then when they have a discussion, expectations that they did their homework and they talk through it, and they use what they call the Thayer technique, which essentially they have a kid talk through the problem. And from there, very, very effective. They've been doing it for 20 years. Great. And, let me explain. Pat and Dr. Rowe, they're like rock stars. They've gotten kids with, that you've seen with 11 or 13 on the ACT, and they got them the qualifying scores. So again, it's just getting the right people. Yeah.
Hold on. We're talking about these rock stars. We're talking about these people that are doing these wonderful, powerful things. How exactly are you marketing these stories that can appeal to that parent who may be concerned about his or her child dealing with academic issues and potentially could improve? How are you telling these stories to humanize and market services that you, the people that's out there, the rock stars, and the services you provide? How are you doing this?
That's where we need help from, Secretary of the Army or Dr. Wardensky at MNRA to try to get funding for these programs, because there are people out here that's doing it that needs to be brought to scale. And, so, I know that people get very excited about the kid going to West Point, but, we have all the service academies. We have 7 senior military colleges. Then we got HBCUs. So, you need funding in these proven techniques and bring the scale, because they've had success and they have a track record. Dr. Rowe, again, over 20 plus years of success there. So there's out here, but sometimes, again, I think that, getting to the right people, and I never understood why the funding wasn't there to support some of these programs. I don't know if it wasn't the right pitch or the right people. Sometimes leadership, they're only there for 2 to 3 years. So, when you're talking about a 4 or 5 year plan, they're not going to be there. And there's some biases that people say, well, why would I invest in these kids right here? When a certain percentage is going to end up in jail anyway. So I had a comment. I had a conversation with the institute official, school official a while ago, that it dawned on me that he did not believe that, even though it looked at our success rates, that he did not believe there were a certain amount of kids of color that were competent, capable, had academic qualifications and the scores to be competitive. And I'm like, hey, guy, I have a young lady that's graduating from West Virginia University Dental School next year as the president of her class that wants to become an RN dentist. I have a woman that graduated from the U.S. Army Ranger School. I have a kid that's learning to fly F-22s for the Air Force right now. They were, they were like there. You saw them going through, but there's a part of folks that are out there that still think that that's the exception, that it can't be the normal. That and it's not. I don't want to say that they're racist, but if you don't get the funding and sources to bring those things to scale, and then let's be real. Let's have the uncomfortable talk out here. The more kids that you have competitive, that's gonna bump somebody else's kid out.
Hey, that's the truth. That's the ugly truth. That is like, wait, hold on. We understand, bringing up and improving the numbers and the opportunities, but that may push, this kid whose parents I'm good friends with outside of work. Man, you're telling something and you're saying something that may hurt a lot of feelings.
But that's hurt a lot of feelings. But hey, talk to the chief of staff and talk to General McConville. What is this phrase? Winning matters. If I grew up where America's, America, we're winners. So get the talent, get the best talent, and let the chips fall where may they lay. But you got to get the resources to get the talent so they can be as competitive. You need to have kids fighting and competing for ROTC Scholarship Service Academy appointments, and not just get the best, simply the best of what applies, but get the best of what's available. That's what our nation deserves. And people who get these slots, they need to know that they have to compete and work for it, and not to just kind of, not like I say slid in, or sometimes there's people that think that they're not as competitive as they think they are. And then that's when they get their reality, when they get to the next level, where they get to the academies or college, or they get in and become a lieutenant and they start to see their peers for the first time. But you got to start that competition in middle school, and start this thing competing and by raising the bar.
Absolutely, since middle school, as Miss Donna Rice had brought up earlier. But sir, we've got a heck of a question coming up here. Let's go ahead and post this question. The question is, thank you for this hosting this informational. I'm an educator who works with African American and Hispanic high school students who are working on their AA and IT as cybersecurity specialists. My students in the JRTC pathway have great guidance. What do you recommend for students who realize grade 11 or 12 that the military is their pathway? Also, what are emerging military programs for cybersecurity? Good question, Robert. Thank you.
Wow, Robbie, thanks for your question on that one. That's a little bit to unpack there. There's a great organization out there that works with kids in IT, computer science, and coding called BDPA, Bravo Delta Papa Alpha.org. They have a lot of ties with there. West Point, through their computer science department, they have a great initiative that a lot of people don't have working. People don't realize that they have a lot of badging and credentialing that you can go online. Again, let these kids know where some of the do the research and get and point them in the right direction. They can get a lot of badging and credentialing there, and get these certificates. But there's a lot of pathways they have, and I think that's one of the challenges with a lot of JRTC instructors, that the technology has changed so quickly. They weren't brought in on it, so they're not comfortable or not aware of some of these things, so they can't offer the right advice. And sometimes that ego kind of gets in the way, that they don't want to look as less than professional, not knowing that they don't want to look like the village idiot, so they kind of shy away from it. Also look at JLab, the JRTC Leadership Academic Bowl. That's headed up by the Terry Wilfon's group with College Options Foundation. From there, and then emerging military programs. There's also a couple of bills that's going through Congress that they're trying to get funding. I think one went through last year for funding for cyber certificates, and just figuring out where that money has gone is a little bit of a challenge. But again, BDPA, look at the West Point has some of the programs out there for certificates from there. And then I know BDP on their website, they have a lot of these pathways for those cyber training. And then, of course, you got all these programs with the different letter agencies out here, FBI, CIA, all those folks. And that's where that's where I tie in a lot of those letter agencies of going to military service, because if you serve in the military, that speeds up your process time to get into those letter agencies. It provides that leadership experience that you may have to not just get into those letter agencies, but become leaders within the agencies. And those type of conversations that, you have to connect the dots for kids to say, hey, this is an ends to a mean, but, in order for you to be the best at what you want to be, that you got to, use this skill set. And I think in the Army, we have to, or the military, we have to trust that kid's not going to go run off to take their skill sets to industry, or somehow they're going to leave the service. Let that be their decision. Because what happens is, like a lot of times kids say, hey, I'm going to go in for like 3 years. I think you talked to Lieutenant General Bingham the other day. She said the same thing. Like, hey, she was just going in and doing her time, and she was getting out. Yeah. And that was it. But, that's her decision. But, again, with the great NCOs that we have, you got to trust that the ones who want to stay that's committed, to learn about soldiering and taking care of people, that passion is going to kick in, and you got to just trust the process. That's why it's important to get the pool of candidates out there. So the ones who want to step off and leave, hey, so be it. Thank you for your service. We appreciate it. But the ones who want to stay, you have a higher quality pool of officers that want to stay.
I would say a motivator that some may have for staying in is an actual environment where they aren't ostracized or passive aggressively looked down on based on the color of their skin as well. So there's these other effects and reasons why people may stay in. And maybe with this recent social move that the military is doing regarding implicit bias, racial injustice, maybe that can be a motivating factor to have many of the talented folks that we have in the military that is of African American, Hispanic descent will actually stay in and make an impact long term.
Hey, look, man, I'm excited about the future, to be honest with you. With the kids that's coming in, because the kids are hungry, they're competitive, they're not trying to be wedded to the past. So for them, it's a blank slate. So those are the kids that I'm after, because they're going to look at it as what's an opportunity, what's in it for them. And then it's our job to get them connected with the right people to help get them on the path to where they can be successful. So I look at it. I don't look at the world as going to hell in a handbasket. I'm a glass half full type of guy.
We just got a baptism. We just got a social baptism, I could call it. We had a reckoning that was needed, and it's going on, and it's something that a lot of people are celebrating. Some people may be hesitant about it, but I see it as a good thing. These different things that are happening. But sir, I want to go into probably the final question of it all. But let's go ahead and, as a follow-up to that prior comment that was brought up, Ms. Harris said, "Thank you. I'll take this information back to the school." Hey, Ms. Harris, you could actually take this link back as well, this video that's going on YouTube. You could forward it to as many people as you like, people who may be looking for this information as well. So shout out to you, Ms. Harris. So the final sets of questions that I see, comments that I see coming up, is coming from Mr. Pat Luck. Are you also seeing these comments as well?
Yep. And no, Pat, she's gonna get on me about here. There's some great, wonderful programs out there. If those can see the live comments, AOP, which stands for the Army Education Outreach Program. The bottom line is that there are so many internship opportunities that out here that a lot of the kids, the biggest issue is that they're not aware of it. Two, they don't have the ability to get the transportation to get there. There's internships for kids coming out of high school. There's kids internships in college, and a lot of people. There's a lot of free DoD programs out there, but we don't have the awareness. And again, that's when I look at the JRTC instructors, the local coaches, teachers, guidance counselors. We got to figure out a way to connect the dots with those folks, and we got to get the folks that's in these programs to build a relationship in the community, because they're not going to come to the BEA conference because they may not be aware of BEA. I didn't know about BEA, which is Be Everything You Are, which is a conference in February. I didn't know about that until later on in my military career. Or NSBE, National Society for Black Engineers. And DoD has a lot of partnerships with a lot of these programs, but again, they're dependent upon the organizations to get this information down to their chapters, but they got to do a better job of figuring out how to network that down. And then when they look at their leadership of asking the right question, and not just tossing the money for a check and expecting them to do it, but what's the follow through, and what's the continuity from there. And again, you're asking a lot of the people in these positions that come in, you're asking the 06 to take over a program and unpack all this stuff and then get down to the root level. I'm not saying it's not going to fail, but it's tough because there's just so much information out there, and getting that stuff. And again, Pat's got up on screen, Cyber Patriot, Starbase, Cyber and Counter UAS. Some of this stuff I just found out in the last month, and I'm still trying to unpack. So there's a world of opportunities out here, but we got to get people more involved. And even for our active duty members, a lot of folks today, they want to give back. If you're active duty, your job is your job, right? Soldier, and they're here. Stay in contact with your folks, or just as you research and passing along the information. But again, you have a limited amount of bandwidth, and that's why I think that veterans out here that may have a little bit more disposable time, some may have some more disposable income, it's incumbent upon them to be involved in the community, talking to the Black Greek-led organizations, again, that have those horizontal and vertical levers. And a lot of the adults, they got to put their ego aside and break bread with each other. Because again, we have too many resources available. I mean, even I have a nonprofit, and I know that people, the people trying to get money to Black Greek-led organizations, and there are different charities or different things that initiative out here. But when you look at it, African American Army officers, they have 14,000 people on there. Then you had African American Officers 2.0, or African American Officers, which is all branches of service, and minority officers. we have a lot of people that are out here that we can fund a lot of this stuff ourselves or get the information ourselves. That gives me optimism, but it also causes me a lot of frustration. A lot of times, because it's like we're waiting for DOD to get involved. It's like, and how
we can do it ourselves.
Yeah. It's like General Ordinero said that when a few years ago, like, hey man, don't be dependent on us. My career is terminal. You got to look at what are you going to do? And I took that as a personal challenge. That was 7 years. I mean, almost 8 years ago now. That took that as a personal challenge to take that on.
Well, I'll tell you what. If any of these named organizations or programs want to come and advertise what they're all about, hey, as someone who's Greek lettered, a veteran, and have a lot of disposable time himself, and I've got a platform, come on over and we'll have a conversation and we'll advertise what you're all about. I'm not looking for a check. I'm just looking for an opportunity to talk to somebody, right? But, sir, I want to say, in closing, we had a really good conversation over the different services that your organization provides. We've got the ticker information on the bottom scrolling that anyone can reach out to you on these 3 different platforms, whether it be website, Instagram, or giving you a call and just talking to you about it. I guess in closing, sir, if you want to just share, I guess words of advice, motivations, or people could reach out to you. Obviously, we got that information. Maybe give them a reason as to why your service could be a catalyst to, as far as bridging the gap for finding that talent and bringing that talent throughout the 6th through active duty time. Let's talk about it.
Again, as I stated, our goal modestly is to help about 500 kids per year annually within the next 3 to 5 years. That's about $40 million with the scholarship offers and service academy appointments. We also want to expand that out to about 15,000 kids and looking for about 10,000 mentors, so we can track the kids from middle school through high school, through college, through employment and commissioning. So we're in it for the long haul. My hope is to convert that into, look at the effectiveness of mentorship over a 7 to 10 year period, so we can link up with the RAND Corporation or the Brookings Institute to show the effectiveness of mentors over here and figure out what wins and loses. Because again, our nation, it requires that talent, and for us to grow in the military is a huge opportunity to do that. Again, we're a nonprofit, so it's a heavy lift. But again, there's a lot of folks that's out there that can help in, and we're always seeking donations, but we're applying for grants and those type of opportunities also. But we're here to be a part of this for the long haul, because this is very personal for me. I was one of those kids, that people took a chance on and saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. We do take it seriously because we also have to be reality what we're asking these kids to do. Ultimately, we won't be, I have to look at myself and be truthful and say, hey, I may be not a casualty assistance officer or casualty notification officer, but I'm going to have to look at these parents. Just like when I look at these parents and say, hey, your kid's going to graduate, and when they get across the stage where we had to pull, push, drag, kick, or carry them across the stage. At the same time, I may have to be going there and console the family and say, hey, know that I was part of that process, that, they were asked to sacrifice for our nation. And that's something that I don't take it lightly, and I pray to God that it doesn't get to that point. But that's the part of our business, and there's knowing you don't talk about that with families, but you also have to be prepared to deal with that is the case. And it's very personal again, because these are our future leaders, entrepreneurs, mothers, fathers, doctors, all those folks that's out here. And if you're not willing to make that investment, and that's why I implore like DOD to look at this. It's not the business of making the retention, but it's a business of investing in a community that's invested in our nation.
Excellent. Hey, sir, I really appreciate you taking the time and coming and talk with me today. You are welcome to come on back again at a different time. Just share whatever information that you want to share. The platform is here, and welcome to your presence again.
Thanks again for having me, Otis, and look forward to future exchanges and dialogue here.
Absolutely.
Huge fan of your program.
Keep going. I appreciate it. hang out in the broadcast room. Let's talk for a little bit there, okay?
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
All right. And so in closing, great organization. The information is on the bottom there as far as how you can contact them. If you want to serve as a mentor, if you want to serve as, possibly working with that organization to really improve the stock of quality officers that we have currently serving in our military. The proof is in the pudding. If you put better stock and you put better investments into an organization or a community, that community in turn will support and invest in you. So I hope someone in DoD is tracking what we're selling and what we're advertising and what we're showing. In closing, I always say it kind of connects with what we spoke about today. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of others. Bye now.